All right. Thank you everyone for joining. We are going to talk a little bit this afternoon about case management ecosystem here at SUNY Oswego. And I appreciate you all taking the time to learn a little bit more. All right, so like I mentioned, we wanted to talk about the case management ecosystem. As some of you know, if you've been around campus for a few years, this has really evolved over the last, I would say, 5 years, and how we are responding and supporting students from multiple levels across our campus. Some are required, and some are good faith efforts to make sure that our students are cared for. And there are a lot of different ways that this is happening. So we have our academic care team, our care team, behavioral intervention team, bias prevention and response team, Title IX, basic needs, and many, many others. But these are the ones that I'm going to touch on today. And like earlier, I will say thank you to John for hosting. I appreciate it, and all the workshops that have happened over the last few weeks. So case management, what is case management? Our one of our basic needs case managers, Kim, will always say, I'm the social worker of campus. And I think in some ways that does kind of resonate with what we're trying to achieve in the sense that we want to support our students through whatever they might be experiencing in a really kind of holistic way. And oftentimes that comes through efforts of a team. And so our case management process here at SUNY Oswego is not a one-person show. There are many people behind the scenes that are trying to support a student or a group of students through difficult situations and through their time here at SUNY Oswego. Prior to a couple of years ago, there wasn't a real concerted effort. There were people behind the scenes helping students always, whether it was through the counseling center, advisement, even the dean of students and some other folks in student affairs. But it wasn't as cohesive as it is now, and wasn't as strategic as it is now. And so we've really pushed to kind of make this more, um, yeah, more, more, again, more cohesive, more strategic. And also, there are some really fantastic models across the US that people have showed great success with. NABITA is one of the National Association Behavioral Intervention and Threat Assessment groups. They have really kind of led the way in talking about the best ways to support our students and also mitigate any threats to campus and make sure that our campus community is safe. So we wanted to make that change, and with some changes in staffing over the years, we've been able to really kind of develop this model across campus. Some of the programs that I'm going to talk about today. So we have our academic care team, and so some of you may have some familiarity with this. So this is a group of folks, mostly comprised of people from advisement, the Office of the Dean of Students, counseling, Res Life, and other program partners like EOP, athletics, etc. And what we do is we really assess what takes place through the starfish system. So if someone raises a flag in starfish and the student is responsive to their initial network, they can be negatively cleared, and that puts it on our radar that the student's not responsive. And it kind of takes it to the next step. And usually it means that somebody from our team is reaching out. So this team in the middle. So it could be advisement, it could be our Office of the Dean of Students, it could be the Counseling Center, or Res Life, depending on the severity. We also have Andrew here, so I don't know if Andrew wanted to share a little bit more about the academic care team. He's been instrumental in helping do some of that work and also keep track of the data. So, hi,
I'm
Andrew.
here to listen, Grace. Awesome. But yes, great work.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for being here too. And so this team really does feed into the care team, which is next. So care team is really comprised of the Office of the Dean of Students and counseling folks that are case managers. And we sit down and review any kind of behavioral concerns. And so you can imagine that sometimes when a starfish flag goes up and is negatively cleared, it might be for excessive absences, for example. That would then maybe rise to our care team because obviously excessive absences and absenteeism is a concern, and we're worried about that student's health and safety. And so that's one way that we overlap. And so we actually get our information from the care team from multiple places. So it could be from direct reports to our email through the concern report form, which I'll talk about in a little bit. It could come from a behavioral starfish flag. It could be from the OSBot. So some of you know about the chat bot that sends out messages to students directly. If a student writes to that and says, "Hey, I'm struggling with something," we could respond through the care team. Sometimes it's through direct emails or phone calls. It could be from family, it could be from faculty, staff, fellow students. It doesn't matter where it's coming from, we will follow up as a care team. We also have some kind of supplemental teams out there that support our work and we support theirs. So we have the Bias Prevention and Response Team and Title IX, as many of you know. And both of these teams have representatives from the Office of the Dean of Students, Title IX, ODEI, Res Life, Conduct, Academic Leadership, the Deans, Associate Deans, Ramin, and more. And this comes through many different reports. To be honest with you, the BPRT and the Title IX reports are private. They go just to two people on campus, so they are not widely shared. But sometimes if a student overlaps in these areas, we are then able to kind of help that student better because we know that they have a lot going on. And then lastly is behavioral intervention team. And I believe prior to my time that the BIT team was actually the team that really kind of collected all of this stuff previously. And this team consists of ODS, the Office of the Dean of Students, Counseling, Ramin, Scott Swayze, NUP, Conduct, etc. Res Life, I think, is also there. And they sit down and look at cases that are pretty extreme. And thankfully, because of all these other structured systems, we've actually only this past semester had two students that kind of rose to the level of the BIT team review. And what happens at that is usually we will sit down and look at the student's situation, their behavior, the resources available to them, and kind of determine what kind of threat they are to themselves or to others, and then proceed with caution and care. I'll go into this and I have a more of a visual representation of this, but really what happens, so with case management at really any of these levels, is we respond to the reports. We typically gather information from folks about what it is that they are concerned about. We connect with the student or other involved parties as much as we can. We can communicate, that we've responded to a student or that we're in connection with a student or that we're going to follow up with a student. We provide intervention strategies and support. Every once in a while, we'll need to assess a threat or risk. And we want to make sure that our campus community is safe and that we're using the resources effectively. And then we monitor generally a student that's in concern. We try to stay in touch with them or keep an eye on them to make sure that they're good through the remainder of the semester. So some of you know Starfish has had a long history on our campus as it has come about and how people have been using it. I do see, at least from switching from academic affairs and the advisement role in EOP to what we're doing now, I can kind of see a fuller picture of why it's important to do this work. So we really heavily rely on these Starfish flags and reports to give us a better picture of what a student might be experiencing. So yeah, a student might be, I used this example earlier this week, a student might be acting out in a class, but it's the only class they're going to. They might not be going to any other classes, and that's good information for us to know. And so it's really helpful if people are concerned or worried or want us to know a certain behavior that they report it either through Starfish or email is fine. In this presentation, which I'll share with everyone, there is this tracking sheet that Andrew provided. I can't open it here, but essentially it gives the opportunity for you to kind of see what flags are viewable to people, and particularly the student. I know sometimes people are worried about reporting a student and having the student see what they're writing because they want to stay anonymous or they don't want the student to know that they've reported them for their concerns. And so this tracking sheet will be able to help you decide which is the best flag to use. Again, if you're not sure, you can always just email or call us as well. That's another direct way to get a hold of us in the Office of the Dean of Students. The behavioral concern flag also just goes to us, which is really helpful. And so if you ever need to get a hold of us either through Starfish or through this other reporting system I'm going to talk about, please use that. So the other one is the student of concern referral form. This is through our Maxient system, which is actually a database that we use to really kind of keep track of what a student's experience might be. So we have our students in the system, and if a student kind of pops up for whatever their case might be, a concern that comes through, we're able to kind of add any notes that we have with meeting with a student, any concerns that we have with meeting with a student, all go into this system that helps us track how they're doing. This is actually a really great system because we've incorporated our basic needs request forms in the system. So a student might pop up in a class for, absenteeism or a behavioral concern, and then we see that they actually put in a request for a basic need. And so we can kind of, again, start to see a bigger picture of maybe what the student is experiencing, and maybe why some of these things are happening, so we can support them better. So you can find this form through this link. You can also find it on our Dean of Students page, on the BIT website, and other, helpful things on our faculty and staff resources. I did want to share a visual of what we do. I think this is a little bit clearer. So a report comes in, we create the case at Maxient. Our team reviews it. So often we have somebody responding pretty quickly. And that could be the counseling center or our office. And typically what we'll do is we'll respond to the reporter and say, thank you so much for your report, or thank you for letting us know. If we need clarification, we might ask that, or we might just say, we'll follow up with a student. Then we also follow up with the person of concern. And we typically try to meet with that person. If they don't come in, we still share resources with them through email or through the phone, depending on which way we're reaching out to them. We then follow up if we can share any additional information, and we'll close the case after. Typically a case, if the student gets their resources pretty quickly, and we have some engagement and we know they're connected, say to the counseling center or to an off-campus resource, we'll close the case in a week or so. But sometimes cases stay open all semester. It depends on where the student's at. The biggest thing is if you're unsure, just ask. So I know that seems really vague and open, but at the end of the day, if you have a concern or worry about somebody, even if it's not a student and you're not sure where to go with it, reach out to us. We will help. Often it might not be our office, but we will get you to the right place. We just want to make sure that we're watching out for each other, supporting each other the best that we can. We are really lucky on our campus to have all of these different structures in place to support students, and all of these different people involved. So if somebody were to get sick tomorrow, we still have 6 other people on the team that can respond to a student and can follow up with that student because we have our notes in place and we have all of the documentation together. So once again, I think we're pretty lucky. And I'm just, grateful for everyone here in this meeting too that is part of that team. So I can see some familiar faces in the room, that I know that have been around the table during some difficult discussions on how to help a student. So thank you all. If you have any questions, I'll open it up.
I guess my concern as an instructor is that these starfish flags are often closed very quickly and not always with effect. And so seeing that you said cases normally close within a week sort of added to that concern. So like I put in a flag, the advisor tried to reach out, the student didn't respond, it goes to you. And then the student's like, oh yeah, I'm going to try harder. And then it's closed, right? But they're still failing the course. And so I guess my concern is what really happens in the long term in this situation.
Yeah, so if it's an academic concern like that and they're not doing well in the class, I mean, we can't really control a student's effort or attention in the classroom. That's a bigger conversation maybe with the advisor. For these cases, generally, these are kind of like behavioral concerns, mental health concerns, are the biggest thing that we see through the care team, or through BIT. In those cases, often like we have the opportunity to provide resources and support. Often the students are engaged with that, but they also have the right and the ability to not respond or to not take those resources, unfortunately. But we can at least do our best in making sure that we've provided those resources and support if the student wants them. Yeah.
So should we keep reporting the same student again and again? It's been a couple of weeks, nothing has changed. They apparently went
Yep.
through the whole process and then send them
Yeah,
back to you.
yeah. Absolutely, because it's not just us, it's their advisor, it's other folks that they might be interacting with. It might be other faculty that can see that note, depending on what note you're putting in. It does not hurt to continue to report. I know it's laborsome, but I do think it's something that is important to document, because sometimes we sit and we look at the flags and we're like, okay, so this happened, last month, and by the time the flag closed, we don't know if it's gotten better. So anytime you can provide that feedback, it is helpful for our team to know where the student's at, if there's improvement or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, great question. Hi,
How
Michael.
much should we continue pursuing any problem that a student might be going through if they are no longer in our class, if they're no longer going to be at the school, like they're transferring? I've been told in the past to just drop an issue with a student being harassed because he was not going to be part of the school anymore, so he's not our problem anymore.
Hmm.
What should we do in a situation like that?
I would say if is it like an ongoing conversation you're having with this student, or it's just a concern that you have?
It was a concern.
Okay, yeah, you can let us know. Just contact our office, so we can document it. Every once in a while we do have some students that are no longer students here, but they're still on our radar. They might still be local, they might still be engaging with different faculty and staff or programs across campus. So we do keep an eye on them as well. Again, we can only provide the resources that we have, right? We can't necessarily enact on them. Like, for example, counseling might not be able to engage with that student because they're not a student. But we can at least provide them some outreach and support, if you are concerned. So just let us know. Good question. If you have any others, let me know and I will make the slides available as well. So you can click on those links. But thank you all. I think I'm doing it.
Thank you.
Grace, your slides are